My palms were sweating under the cheap satin of my rented gown. The auditorium at my university in Sao Paulo was more crowded than ever, every bench groaning under the weight of proud parents, restless siblings, and cluster upon cluster of soon-to-be graduates anxious for their moment in the glare of the lights. I was meant to be delivering my class's graduation speech. I'd been told to speak for 6 minutes about the future hours, what we'd learned, maybe toss in something uplifting for the parents. Instead, I choked out 2 lines, voice wobbly at first, before gaining an edge of simple conviction. I want to build software that connects workers across Brazil, so no matter their neighborhood, income, or background, someone's always got their back. Because together, we can fight the impossible odds that keep us apart. Before I could even move to the next sentence, a voice sliced through the tentative applause. Vai sonhando! Keep dreaming. Someone in the back row, maybe someone from my own economics cohort. Waves of laughter rolled out, building as more people joined in. I locked eyes with my Uncle Mauricio, who shrugged, then looked down at his lap, embarrassed for me or for himself. 6 minutes became 60 seconds. The master of ceremonies patted my back as they ushered me off the stage, replacing my trembling notes with a joke about how our next Mark Zuckerberg was going to take a little nap. More chuckles. My mother pressed her lips tight in disappointment, her hands stiff and cold on my elbow as I made my way down from the stage lights into the dim auditorium. The reception afterward was just as cold. My cousins, all business suits and conservative smiles, offered congratulations as if it pained them. My grandmother, who had never quite understood what I saw in computers, muttered something about wasted talents and good government jobs. The air was thick with doubt and the sour tang of cheap sparkling wine. That silence, the sort where you know people are talking as soon as you leave the room, was louder than any laughter. I took the long walk home from the subway, feeling like I'd stepped out of my own shadow, the city glowing harsh and unkind. For months, maybe years, I could still hear that laughter whenever I opened my laptop at the tiny table in my flat in Vila Mariana. My plan to launch a SaaS platform, something that could help gig workers find steady jobs, arrange shifts, band together for rights, was met time and time again with skepticism so icy it stung. "You're just a boy with big ideas," my father said over Sunday lunch, slapping his palm on the table for each syllable. "You think those companies will let you break in? They'll eat you alive." I barely slept those first 2 years. My co-founder, Flavio, lasted 8 months before he caved to his father's pressure and took a banking job. He left me the code we'd built together, still buggy, half-documented. I fixed bugs late into the night by the yellow light of my kitchen lamp, watching my savings shrink from barely enough to how many more days of groceries can I afford? The financial crash didn't help. Investors ghosted me, one by one, until only spam emails and vague promises remained. I tempted a call center to pay the rent. My mother would call, her voice small and hopeful, always offering to set me up with real people whose companies at least made money. "There's still time," she said, "to change your mind." But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of delivery drivers outside my apartment, fighting for shifts. The cashier in the supermarket, who'd lost his job and picked up 4 flex gigs instead. Chasing $100 notes that vanished before he'd even touched them. The city, with its gray towers and pothole-ridden side streets, became my proving ground. I programmed while sitting behind scratched glass in internet cafes, sending cold emails to bakeries, salons, restaurants, any place, small enough to worry, but big enough to want things fixed. Most said no or just left me on red. But one Thursday in June, the owner of a guest house in Liberdade messaged back. She needed a way to book on-call cleaners and translators, to organize shifts without WhatsApp group chaos. I cobbled together a minimum viable product, running on fumes and hope. She signed on, then told her cousin, who ran a food truck, who told 3 other friends. The trickle was slow, uneven, and often humiliating. I pitched to investors in Rio who laughed at the idea of blue-collar SaaS. One man asked if I was building an Uber for losers. Another said, only in Sao Paulo could someone believe this garbage. The silence I'd felt at graduation grew tighter, an invisible hand squeezing my chest. My own uncle, Mauricio, denounced me at every family gathering, rolling his eyes and serving up stories of real, self-made men with steely jaws as BMWs. Don't mind him, my aunt whispered once. You know how it is. People just want to be right. But sometimes, late at night, I heard that mocking laughter in my own head. 6 months after my first user signed up, my bank account was nearly empty. Then, an email popped up from an old friend who worked at a nonprofit. She wanted her volunteers to use my tool too. You can handle 200 people, right? She asked. I sweated and lied. Of course I could handle it. I stayed up all weekend, fixing every bug I could find. She rolled it out. 2 weeks later, I had 500 total users. By accident, my product started spreading. I rewrote code on the bus. I taught myself marketing from YouTube after my shift ended. I obsessed over churn metrics, answered customer support emails in the supermarket aisles. People started to notice the right people this time. One day, a talent scout from a major Sao Paulo startup accelerator called. He wanted to talk about funding. I wanted to ask him if he was joking, but I forced myself to say, yes, absolutely. When? Over the coming weeks, interviews and application rounds gave way to late-night strategy calls and cautious optimism. The funding, when it came, felt like an out-of-body experience, $120,000 and 3 months of mentorship. A lot for me, nothing for a big dog, but enough to breathe. For the first time in years, I let myself dream forward instead of backward. I moved my office out of the kitchen and into a single blinking desk co-working space in Avenida Paulista. One wall of rough glass looked down onto the city, a view studded orange at dusk. Small team, big dream. 2 ex-classmates, 3 hungry interns, a young designer named Isabella with eyes like polished obsidian, and a laugh that made the afternoons warmer. I rebuilt the infrastructure, hardening the data, making sure every hourly worker who touched the app felt seen. I cold-called businesses and poured over coffee-stained user feedback forms. Almost overnight, we went from fighting for a dozen customers to onboarding hundreds per day. Press came knocking. The little startup that could, the papers wrote. TV Globo did a tiny segment. I called my mother just before it aired. I didn't know if you'd make it happen, she said, voice trembling. But you did. My uncles called a week later, not to apologize, of course, but to ask about investment opportunities. Growth came at a cost. New competitors copied our features. Hackers tried breaching our database. But by now, something had changed inside me. Where once I'd felt frozen and adrift under the eyes of skeptics, I now learned to steel myself against whatever came. Resolve, born not of anger or spite, but of sheer necessity. A way of living with a wound. 2 years after graduation, I had 50,000 users, 3 paying enterprise contracts, and a multinational partner in talks. The city's skyline looked different, still shadowed, still unpredictable. But now I could see neon hope threading through even the darkest streets. Then, one summer afternoon, I got the call from my old university. They were launching a new innovation showcase, inviting alumni to return and speak to current students, local press, faculty. You were always ambitious, the woman on the phone said, not quite sure what to call what I had done. I hesitated. In my mind, I saw again the laughter, the mocking eyes. I almost said no. but resolve is a kind of silence you carry like armor. So I said yes. The morning of the event was muggy, sky thick with clouds threatening rain. I went alone. The team had a product launch to run, and besides, the invitation had come for the founder, not the company. The campus had changed. Fresh graffiti on the walkways, more security fences, but the same nervous energy. I recognized a few professors, older now, still bespectacled, their eyes sliding away from me as if they couldn't quite place the face. Inside the main building, banners hung for the showcase. I passed tables loaded with student inventions, apps, gadgets, 3D-printed prototypes. At the far end, my old economics professor stood chatting with a trustee. Uncle Mauricio was in the crowd beside them, lips pursed, eyes roving. I almost turned away, but my name was already being announced. I climbed the stairs to the stage, the same stage where I'd stood blinking in the harsh lights on the day of my humiliation. There was no speech prepared this time, but I felt none of that old trembling.